What's going on, sci-fi fans? My name is Ben and welcome back to another episode of Sci-Fi Wednesdays. We are back on the 1/4000 scale, Revell Star Destroyer, and today we're going to tackle these landing struts and see if we can't get these things nicely fared in and disappeared. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. Now, first thing we're going to have to do is we need to go ahead and try to fill in these giant seams that are all around these three different struts. The first thing I thought, well, we use some styrene, but that's not really going to work because it's such a big gap. I figured out we're going to do something a little bit different, something I've always wanted to try, and that is the baking soda method. We're going to take some baking soda, some super glue, and apparently when you mix those two together, you get a really rock hard finish, very quick drying filler. So we're going to go ahead and try that out on this episode. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and figure out a way so that when we pour the baking soda in there, it doesn't leak all out to the inside of the actual model. So to do that, we're going to take some basic styrene. I'm going to go ahead and cut this into a nice little shape, and we're going to glue that down to go ahead and keep all of the baking soda from flowing down and inside the model. Just a little square of styrene. We're going to have to go ahead and just fix it here just a little bit, do some extra trimming. I want to make sure this is as neat as possible, but to be honest, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is all going to be buried inside the ship. You're not going to see any of it, so it just has to be functional. So we're going to go ahead and just trim up the sides just a little bit, then we'll apply some extra thin Tamiya glue. We'll glue it down. Now let's go ahead and just drop that right down on top of this opening. A little bit of extra thin Tamiya cement. That should keep this all nicely glued together, and then we'll just drop it right down on top, make sure it lines up nicely with that front hinge, and just call it a day. I think that's going to be just fine. Now, of course, we'll just make sure it's glued down, drop a little bit more glue around the edge to make sure it's not going to go anywhere, and then we can go ahead and turn our attention to the other two. Those are going to be a little bit more challenging, I have a feeling, because the actual hinges on those are larger and there's bigger openings. So we're going to have to go ahead and take a look at that, see what we can figure out. So now that we have our block all in place, let's go ahead and grab some of this baking soda and just pour it right on inside. To do that, I'm just using a very small Post-it note. That's probably fine, but I know I'm going to make a mess. So let's go ahead and just take our time. We're just going to pour that around into the different crevices here. And then once I am secure with that, then we'll go ahead and move over to the super glue. Again, this is the first time I've ever tried this. Apparently it does really work and is excellent for large gaps. So we're going to test it out though, but I want to make sure that this is all nicely filled in. We'll smooth it out so there's not just giant lumps of it, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, not too bad. I have everything more or less packed in there and covered up. So now I think it's time to go ahead and try some super glue. Now I'm not entirely certain how this is going to go, so fingers crossed we don't ruin the model right here and now. A little bit of super glue. Let's go ahead and just start dripping it right into that crease. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw it all the way around the opening. I can tell this is actually working. Let's go ahead and just continue all the way around here. Try not to put too much. Got a little bit too much there, but that's okay. It actually cures almost immediately. The minute that super glue touches that baking soda, it's instantly as tough as a rock. That is absolutely crazy. So while that's curing, let's go ahead and move over to the other two landing struts and see what we can do with those. Now, unfortunately, on the back part of the Star Destroyer, we can't use the same idea down here. We actually have to take some paper towel and shove that down in between the landing strut and the actual plastic to act as some sort of filler. This way, when we pour the baking soda down inside, it's not going to flow out all over the place. Because I actually did that off camera and it went everywhere. So let's go ahead and jump into a time lapse. We're going to finish this one side. We're going to start doing some rescribing, some sanding, and see what we can do. right, everybody, so we are back, and I gotta tell you, the baking soda superglue method worked like a charm. It is super quick, and it dries just like a rock. It's crazy. I did come back and do some sanding, and then I did also rescribe a couple of those lost panel lines, so it looks okay, but we won't really know how it looks until after we prime. So while everything is kind of curing, I'm just gonna go ahead and turn my attention over to adding a little bit of extra surface detail. Now, there's a lot of panels that are raised here on the Star Destroyer, but there's large areas that just don't have any sort of detail. So what I want to go ahead and do is add in a couple of these raised panels. Much like I did for the U.S.S Kelvin when I built that, I'm going to try to just add in some armor plating. So let's go ahead and go back into that time lapse. We're going to push forward on the surface detail, and then we're going to go ahead and glue those down. Then we'll assemble up the bridge, assemble the top section, and see how it looks. Let's carry on. All right, everybody, we are back, and as you can see, we've added a lot of these little tiny strips of styrene that act as armor plates. It gives a little bit of interest, and it gives a little bit of subtle kind of 3D elevation to the surface of the ship. Now, there's already these larger patches that are raised, so this just kind of adds to that, and I think it's kind of cool. Plus, I can use it to hide some seam lines here and there, so I like it. I think it looks pretty decent. Now, next episode, we're going to come back, and we're going to start out with some Stynylrez. We're going to airbrush the entire thing with some primer. That's going to make sure that we actually got those seams at the bottom all nicely touched up. It's also going to go ahead and get us ready to go ahead and start painting. We also have the rear thrusters and the engines. We need to go ahead and paint those and get those installed. So there's a lot left to do. We're not quite out of the woods yet. But until our next episode, you guys know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we'll see you back here on the next episode of Sci-Fi Wednesdays and the 1/4000 scale Revell Star Destroyer. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.